Matthew 6 is where we're going to be here this evening. If you need a handout, we've got them in the back. Matthew 6, we're going to start. We finished chapter 5 last 2 weeks ago. I wasn't here last week, but 2 weeks ago we finished chapter 5. In chapter 5, Jesus' focus was on explaining the futility of earning salvation through works. You picked up on that, I'm sure, as you move through, and he says, here's how good the Pharisees are. If you want to get into heaven by works, you have to be better than the best. There's an impossible standard of goodness except through Christ. So the purpose of the Sermon on the Mount, you could say, if you wanted to, in verse 5, Jesus explains how to become disciples of Christ, which is by grace through faith. We would say that's imputed righteousness. You cannot have enough of your own righteousness. You need Jesus' righteousness. Philippians, where Paul says that being found in him, not having my own righteousness, but the righteousness which is of God by faith. So the first part is how to become a disciple. And now we come to chapter 6 and chapter 7, where the focus is going to be largely on how to behave as a disciple. So how to become one, how to behave as one. What is the motivation of a citizen of the heavenly kingdom, is how we could say that. How should I live, given the fact that I'm a believer, given the fact that I have my citizenship in heaven, how should I behave myself? What should my motivation be? And Jesus wastes no time in cutting to the heart of this question by beginning with addressing the matter of giving. The matter of giving. He's not necessarily in this chapter, he's not necessarily talking about the offering as far as at church, to passing the offering plate. It applies, but it's much broader than that. And so I want you to make sure that you don't just have the offering plate in mind, though that certainly has the idea. But it's broader than that. We start off with the truth. Giving without hypocrisy is the first standard that he sets in chapter 6, verse 1. He says, take heed that ye do not your alms before men, to be seen of them, otherwise ye have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. The word take heed is the Greek word prosekio. It means to beware. So Jesus is giving kind of a warning here. He says, hey, you need to be on the lookout for this, because this is the tendency. This is the tendency that we have. Beware, take heed, that you don't give with an ulterior motive. So he's issuing this warning. The word alms here, I feel like it's important that we get that settled here. The word alms, it means benevolence. It means kindness. It would also have the idea of charitable giving. So, again, it's not just the offering plate at church, though it certainly has that. That is giving. That is alms giving. But it would also have the idea of helping someone in need. Somebody, they're without the ability to buy groceries. And so you're able to step up. You say, I have enough to be a blessing to this person. I'm going to give to this person. I'm going to give them, in this context, you could say, I'm going to give them alms. He says, do not your alms before men. Now this seems, as you read just that phrase right there, do not your alms before men. It has the feeling that if I cannot give with complete privacy, if I can't do it with complete secrecy, I should refrain from giving at all. If we were to interpret this according to that, we would say, not only, now we don't pass the plate here anymore, we just have it sitting in the back. But if we were going to take this and we were going to interpret it that way, we would need to put the plate in another room where you go in and you're in complete privacy. And you put your money in, and if you're riding down the road and you see somebody on the side of the road and they're asking for help, you say, well, I would give them money, but I can't because someone might see me. And the Bible says, do not your alms before men. So I can't be seen. That's not the message. This is not a biblical prohibition of passing the offering plate, because that is the epitome of giving alms before men. When I was in the Philippines, I was in a couple different churches where what they do is they would have a plate on the communion table, And when the offertory came, everybody would come forward, and they would put their offering in the plate, and then they go back to their seat. I had never seen that before. I've never seen it since, but it's kind of a cultural thing that they do. Jesus is not forbidding giving where men can see the action. If I were to pull out my wallet, and as I walk out of the auditorium, I were to take out $1 and I were to drop it in the offering plate, and Barry was walking over here and he saw what I didn't break this commandment. Because Jesus expounds on this, he gives more information. The next phrase explains the warning. He says, "Do not your alms before men to be seen of them." It's all about motive. It's all about my heart. Now, if I'm walking towards the back, I take out my wallet, and it's kind of quiet, and some people are talking, and I'm standing back there, and I'm clearing my throat, and I get everybody's attention, and they see me fumbling, and I'm pulling out, and I put my money in with a flourish, and I walk. That's what this is talking about. It's talking about the motive. I did that. If I did that, you'd say, that's silly. Well, we'll get to it in just a second. But if I were to do that, you'd say, I'm doing it in order to be seen of men. I'm doing it for that purpose. That's my motive. And if I'm doing it, if I'm giving to elevate myself in the eyes of those who may be watching, then I've missed the whole point. I've missed the point of giving. This self-aggrandizing spirit may cause men to think highly of me. Now, in this context, you say, well, it would make me think less of you. I think you're silly if you do that. But if I did it, and I didn't go back there and clear my throat, but I did time it so that I did make sure that people could see what I was doing, and I did it in just such a way, and I was doing it in my heart for those people to see me. The verse goes on, it says, "Ye have no reward of your Father which is in heaven." The difference between giving to be seen and applauded by men and giving to honor God and bless others may only be found truly in the heart of the giver. Now, somebody's walking out and I drop my offering in the plate, and it's just what I'm doing. On my way out, somebody else said, well, they wait till just the right second. They do it. They're doing it to be seen of men. Both of us might have been seen of men. It's not about others' eyes. It's about my heart. It's about your heart. When I'm giving with that motivation. 1 Samuel 16 verse 7 says, this was the Lord when he was talking to Samuel. He said, "Look not on his countenance or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth. For man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart." If I see someone putting their offering in the offering plate, they don't lose their blessing unless their heart is wrong. My vision did not rob their blessing. Their heart may have done that, and God sees the heart. God sees what they're giving. Proverbs 17:3 says, "The finding pot is for silver, the furnace for gold, but the Lord trieth the hearts." You give your amount of money, whatever that is. You go on your way. God knows your heart. God knows your motivation for giving. God knows why you do what you do. This is true not only of giving, it's true of everything that you do. And he's going to go on, Jesus, in Matthew 6, he's going to expand on this idea. In Matthew 5, did you get the idea that Jesus was concerned about the heart more than the actions? He says, "Whoso looks on a woman to lust after her in his heart hath committed adultery." He that hates his brother in his heart has committed murder. It's about the heart. And Jesus goes on here, and he's sharing the motivation for a believer in giving. Don't give with hypocrisy. Don't do it to be seen of men. Do it for the honor and glory of God, not for your own honor and for your own glory. But he's going to expand on this. He says here in verse 2, how not to give. Now, the Pharisees provided lots of sermon illustrations for Jesus, and they did in this case as well. He says, "Therefore, when thou doest thine alms," again, remember, charitable giving, "when thou doest thine alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward." When you give, don't sound a trumpet. Now you say, Jesus is speaking in hyperbole, you'd say. Jesus is overstating his point in order to get the desired effect. Surely no one would do this, right? They would, actually. There were some who, now, if you go back in history, you can look, and there are some instances where there were guys who would actually, they'd get somebody to blow a trumpet for them. Now, imagine for a moment the ego. That's extreme. That's the extreme case where I go out and I say, Barry, I'm going to give a big offering this Sunday, and I want you to bring your trumpet, okay? And I'm going to walk to the back, and I want Barry to stand there. Just stand nearby so that when I'm giving and you're blowing the trumpet, maybe point at me, they would do that. There were instances in this time when they would buy water. They would buy water. It was a desert climate, and they would buy water, and they would hire a water bearer who would go into town, and he would be carrying not just water for crops, but drinking water. And so they would buy water and hire a bearer of water to go into the marketplace, and then they would call out. They'd say, "Come and receive the blessing, and honor me, the one who paid for it." That was something that they did. Again, almsgiving for glory, for personal glory. The Pharisees had raised their charitable giving to something of an art form. The Hebrew word, it's tzedakah, was used for both righteousness and almsgiving. That's how closely it was associated. They associated righteousness with almsgiving so close that they used the same word to describe it. By making a spectacle of their giving, they believed that they were able to kind of kill two birds with one stone. If I make my giving public, then I'll be elevated in the sight of men. People will think well of me. Well, that's brother so-and-so. He gives a lot of money. I know because I saw him. He made sure I saw him. He had a trumpeter standing nearby. I know that man gives a lot, so it would raise you in the sight of men, but it would also, they believed, errantly, that it would also give them righteousness before God. In the Apocrypha, that series of books, Apocrypha means doubtful. Remember, they're not inspired, but there is a portion of the Apocrypha that the Jews of this day would have had. It was Tobit 12:8, if you were looking, and if you have one and you want to look it up, it says, "It is better to give alms than to lay up gold. Almsgiving doth deliver from death, and it purges away sin." You see why that's not in the Bible? You see why we say that's doubtful? It's not just doubtful, it's wrong. That's what they believed. So these men, they feel, if I give money publicly and draw attention to myself, people will think well of me. But also, I can give money and I can become more righteous. I can eliminate sin and become more righteous. So here's the problem here. So we have a poor man and we have a rich man. Who could theoretically be more righteous? If you can buy righteousness, the rich guy can be more righteous. Why? He's got a deeper pocket. So if getting right with God is based on how much money I give, having more money to give is certainly a good thing. And so that's kind of how they looked at it. Jesus decried this public show here. He calls them out on it. He says that it's the giving of hypocrites. Jesus never pulled punches with this crowd. This was the same group that he called them, "Woe unto you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites." He called them snakes at another period of time. The word hypocrite, it's the Greek word hypokrites. You hear the word in there. It means an actor who's playing a part, a pretender, or a dissembler. It's somebody who's acting spiritual, but they're not actually spiritual. But people think they're spiritual because, well, have you seen how much they give? That's what they're doing. They're buying public opinion, and in their mind, wrongfully, they think they're buying favor with God. Jesus says of these hypocrites, he says, "Verily or truly I say unto you, they have their reward." The word reward means their pay, their wage. They got what they were looking for. They wanted men to stand back and look at that. Look at him giving money. Look at that. They wanted the applause of men. They wanted people, when they left the area, they wanted people to say, can you believe how spiritual that guy is? That's what they wanted. And they got it. And what did they lose out on? They lost out on the blessing of God. They had their reward. They wanted accolade. They wanted applause. They wanted the praise of men. Those who give publicly with the deliberate motive of being recognized and praised by those around them will receive no eternal reward. That's what Jesus is saying here in this. Again, it's not a matter of if I hand money to somebody and somebody sees me. That's not what this is talking about. This is, I hand money and I make sure that somebody sees me. It's a motive issue. It's a matter of the heart. If I do that, then I lose my reward. I lose that eternal reward. It's almost like it's as if God says, hey, pick a reward. You can get men clapping their hands, or you can get eternal riches. It's kind of the same idea. How many of you, as a child, or maybe you've been one of those wicked adults who has given a child a savings bond? Have you ever done that? It's terrible. You give a child a savings, and you give it to a 3-year-old, right? And a 3-year-old, how happy are they to get a piece of paper that says in 10 years they get money? What would they trade that piece of paper for? A breath mint out of your pocket that had lint on it. They would trade that piece of paper for anything. Why? Because they don't get delaying their I want it now. And these hypocritical people that God says to me, He says, you can have the praise of men. I can have a lollipop, or I can have eternal riches, much more than a savings bond. That's what the offer is. If I choose to receive the accolades and the applause of men, I get my reward, and it won't last long. If I rather, in my heart, I say, you know what? This is for the Lord. It doesn't matter who sees me. I'm not doing it for them anyway. And I give, God will bless me. That's how. So He gives us how not to give, and then He gives us how to give. Here in verse 3, He says, but when thou doest thine alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth. Now, notice that Jesus says, when thou doest alms, not if thou doest alms. What is that? What can we grab from that? You should give. Okay? It's not, well, I can't have this, I just don't give. No, that's another issue. When you give your alms, do it this way. He says, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth. This was a proverbial saying back in that day. It was used fairly commonly. Let me explain what it means. What do you do with your left hand when you shake hands? Because you shake hands with your right. What do you do with your left hand? You have to think about it, though, don't you? What did you do with your left hand the last time you shook somebody's hand? You said, I don't know. I wasn't paying attention. You shook hands with your right hand. What was your left hand? What might have been behind you? You might have been holding something. It could have been in your pocket. You might have been scratching your head. Any number of things could have happened. Why? Because you weren't thinking about it. It's spontaneous. When I'm shaking hands with my right hand, I put out my right hand, and I'm not thinking about this one at all. I'm not putting a whole lot, well, I need to, if you start thinking about your left hand, you'll mess up a handshake, okay? Don't do it. Just go at it. Your left hand does the natural thing. That's what Jesus is saying here. The kind of giving that Jesus is describing here in verse 3, it's not prearranged for maximum publicity. It's not, well, I want people to be around. It's not premeditated to make the biggest splash. Well, I want people to know what I did. It's not done in hopes of achieving applause from men, even the recipient of my gift. Let me say that again. The type of giving that Jesus is talking about is not done in hopes of achieving applause from men, even the one I'm helping. So I'm going to go and I'm going to help this person here. And I give them money, and nobody saw it. It was just me and that person. But I leave and I'm offended in my heart because they didn't thank me enough. That's what this is talking about. Don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. If I'm bent out of shape because that person they weren't grateful enough, why did you give? Did you give for the thank you? Or did you give to the Lord? If I'm giving to the Lord and that person doesn't thank me enough, maybe they have an issue with gratitude. Maybe they have a genuine heart issue themselves. But if I let their lack of gratitude, their heart problem, affect my heart, and I lose my blessing because they didn't thank me enough. You see how that's a problem? That's what Jesus is saying here. Verse 4. So he says, start verse 3. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Not prearranged, you're not looking for the publicity. Verse 4. That thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father, which seeth in secret, himself shall reward thee openly. Secret, just private. Private in my heart. Okay, not necessarily. Sometimes I'm forced to give in a location where the eyes of people can see me. But that's not my motive. My motive is I'm giving to the Lord. And if you happen to see, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you don't see. I'm not arranging this so people will see. Someone said it this way in a commentary. The principle is this. If we remember, God will forget. But if we forget, God will remember. When it comes to my giving, when it comes to my giving of alms, it's a pretty good way of looking at it. Will God see it, though? Can I give and God misses it? No. Hebrews 4:13 says, neither is there any creature that is not manifest in his sight, but all things are naked and opened unto the eyes of him with whom we have to do. You say, no, nobody saw me. The person who I gave with, it was completely anonymous. The person who I gave to didn't know. The Lord laid it on my heart. I wanted to be a blessing. Nobody knows. God knows. You can be sure of that. You didn't slip it past God's eyes. God knows exactly what's going on. I'm to be giving. But again, I can have my choice of reward. I can give for the benefit of man, arranging to be noticed and celebrated for my generosity. And when I choose this path, the only reward I get is whatever men can give. They might give me their acknowledgement. I might go up a few pegs in their opinion. Maybe they'll give me a round of applause. Who can say? But if I give spontaneously, privately, and without fanfare, seeking only the acknowledgement of God, that's my heart motive. That's the reason why I'm not giving for the benefit of others' applause. I'm giving for the Lord, and I'm giving because He laid it on my heart. I'm giving with the right motive. When I choose this path, God may reward with temporal acknowledgement, but the true reward will be of eternal value. Does God ever give us temporal reward for our giving? Or is it always eternal? Is it always laying up treasure in heaven, or does God ever give us temporal reward? He does. Does God always give us temporal reward? No. He gives us eternal. That's why he says in Matthew 6, if you look ahead just a little bit, Matthew 6:19, he says, lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. I can give, I can lay up treasure for myself, but it's my heart's desire to have treasure in heaven. But I stand before you as an American who lives in southeast Iowa, and I can tell you, God's given me some treasure here on earth. I'm wealthy by the standards of most of the world. God's blessed me temporally. Not because I deserve it, but because He's gracious. And I've given to the Lord. There's a passage in Micah where the Lord says, try me. God doesn't say that a whole lot, but he says, try me, you give, and I'll give back. Who do you figure has a bigger shovel, me or God? As fast as I can shovel it, God is able to pour out a blessing that I won't even be able to handle. That's the kind of God that we serve. And God does daily load us with benefits, temporal benefits. But our heart's desire should be, Galatians 3:2, set your affections on things above. That's what it should be. That's what this is all about. Giving for the glory of God and eternal reward is entirely a matter of the heart. It's all in your heart. It doesn't have anything to do with if you write a check to the church. There was a time when people said that writing a check to the church was breaking this. No, it's a matter of the heart. The fact that somebody knows that you gave to the church is not, you're not losing your reward unless you're giving so that you get their applause. It's all a matter of the heart. The amount is not important. The gratitude of the recipient is not important. The acknowledgement of the public is not to figure in my giving. But motives are tricky things, aren't they? Motives are tricky. As I was looking through this, have you ever wondered, when you get to heaven, how many of the good things that you've done, how many of them have you done with a pure motive? Because we're selfish. I'm selfish. I'm proud. I read Jeremiah 17:9. It says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Can I figure out a way to be spiritual, to look spiritual for my flesh? Oh, yeah. The Pharisees did. They had it down to a science. Here's the answer. Only by walking in the Spirit and following His leading will I have any hope of giving with a pure heart. It's a matter, again, of purity of motive. Not of me making a big show, but also, I don't need to go into a private room. You don't need to get here to church an hour early. Well, I want to get in there and get my offering in the plate so nobody sees me. No, you don't need to do that. It's a matter of your heart. If you come and you're standing back there at the offering plate clearing your throat, which, watch, somebody's going to have a coughing fit at the plate this Sunday. Don't have it. If I come in and I'm getting people's attention so I can give, that's a problem. It's a matter of the heart. When it comes to giving charitably, trust the Lord for opportunities and trust the Lord for the reward. You've got a savings bond that will mature when you get into heaven, or you've got a piece of candy. Okay? A child would take the candy. Why? Because I can't eat the paper. Okay? God says, lay up treasures for yourselves in heaven. Don't take the cheap temporal, take the eternal, and trust God for opportunity, for reward, and trust the Spirit of God to lead you in a way that's acceptable to Him. Any thoughts, questions, comments that you have on these first couple verses here of Matthew 6? So this week we talk about giving. If you look ahead, next week we look at verse 5, and it says, and when thou prayest. And if you look ahead at the next passage, he's going to say, when you fast. In all of these things, you need to do it God's way. So we'll look at all of these as we go through here, work our way through Matthew 6.